I'm going to tell you a very important story about my friend and her daughter Becky. But before that, there are two important concepts that I'm going to mention that are going to be a key factor in what I'm sharing. Number one, all behavior arises from a state of stress. Number two, negative behavior arises from an unconscious place. It's not cognitive, and we cannot attach intent to most negative behavior, especially with children. So here's the little story of Becky. This is one that is repeated every single day, multiple times a day, in every home that has children. I've both experienced this as a child myself and been in the same situation more times than I want to admit with my three kids. The reason why this story is so incredibly valuable for us today is because it offers a glimpse into the heart and mind of a small child as beliefs and patterns of behavior are being formed. Even though this is happening every single day, we don't often get to see it live. So Becky is a 4-year-old, and as many of us know, 4-year-olds are wonderful at having big, loud emotions that result in bad behaviors. Temper tantrums, outbursts, what we would like to call in our family pitching a fit. So the other day, Becky was not happy with something that she was told or not allowed to do. And so she went into a pitching a fit cycle, started stomping her feet, making sure that everybody in the house knew that she was upset about what was happening. And so my friend, just like many of us have done, either because we've been instructed to do so or through modeled behavior from our parents, she sent Becky off to her room to think about the way that she was reacting and to calm herself down. Sounds like the standard American way of handling a child that is in the throes of bad behavior. Now, I have done that many, many times myself. And also, there were plenty of times that I escalated the situation into spanking or some other form of physical, corporal punishment, a consequence. And, I realize now that many times that was so much more damaging to the child than it was helpful for their training and development. So this is no shade to any parents out there. It's just that I wish that I had been taught and modeled something different. I wish that I knew what was going on in a child during these episodes. So here's where the story really gets interesting. My friend was walking past Becky's room and overheard her daughter saying out loud, "I'm bad. I hate myself. I can't believe I did this." Wow, what an amazing window into the heart and mind of this child that was experiencing a rupture in relationship with mom. Of course, as soon as my friend heard her daughter saying these things out loud, she went in, sat with her, expressed her love for her, corrected the negative self-talk that she was hearing, and she did a really, really good job in that moment addressing the situation. However, this is happening every single day, multiple times a day, and rarely are we given the opportunity to step in and interrupt those experiences, thoughts, and emotions that are developing our beliefs and patterns of behavior that we take into adulthood. I know my friend did the best that she could in this situation, and yet this is such a wonderful opportunity to take a step back to really understand what was going on in the moment and how could it have been handled in a way that is honoring to the developmental stage of the child and at the same time build relationship. If we go back to those 2 points that I mentioned earlier, that our behavior arises from a state of stress and negative behavior arises from a place of unconsciousness, it's easy for us to see that the behavior little Becky was demonstrating in the moment was an outward representation or mirror for the inner state of stress that she was experiencing. Let's say she was feeling sad because whatever it was that mom said or did, and one of the easiest ways for us to get away from an uncomfortable emotion like sadness is through anger. Anger feels better than being sad. And so in that moment, she was demonstrating a very loud or uncomfortable emotion, and anger was the clue, not the root. In that moment, Becky, through her behavior, was reaching out and inviting mom to see that there was an emotional state inside that she couldn't handle. She did the only thing that she knew, and that was to create a cue for mom to connect with her emotionally and to tune to her, to help her to become regulated and return to a state of internal peace by feeling her emotions with someone safe. We think that we can train a child to be separate from us and think about their behavior, but this is an utter impossibility, especially at this stage or in this particular emotional state. A child will not have the ability to have cognitive reasoning to control their behavior. And so when my friend sent her daughter away to self-regulate and self-attune, there were no skills or abilities that Becky had to do that appropriately. So where does the self-talk come into play? The I hate myself stuff. A child is biologically egotistical, and that doesn't mean selfish. All that means is that a child is incapable of experiencing the world through a perspective outside of themselves. They don't have the ability to do this until much later. And so when anything bad happens to a child, whether it's internally or externally, unless there is a parent or caregiver there to help manage and regulate or attune to the child in that experience, the child will always assume that this bad thing that's happening to them is because of them. I'm being treated bad because I'm bad. The child has absolutely no ability to go, I need to make better choices. I'm probably overreacting or misunderstanding. Dad isn't really mad at me. He's just taking it out on me. No. A child will always internalize their negative experiences and will make sense of those negative experiences by assuming and then believing and telling themselves that they are the problem. This simple interaction then becomes the birthplace of toxic shame that we carry into our adult lives, leading to relationship problems, health issues, addictions, fill in the blank. Now imagine, Becky is in a loving home with parents that love her and are doing their best to care for her. There's no amount of perfect parenting that we can expect out of ourselves. And actually, I'm very thankful for this. Research shows that kids need parents who make a certain percentage of mistakes so that they can learn to be resilient in the real world. And Becky is blessed to be in one of those homes. But imagine how impactful this negative self-talk is when a child is in an emotionally, physically, or spiritually abusive or unsafe home, or where mom and dad always break relationship when uncomfortable emotions are felt or expressed. Or what if internal stress is met with pain and violence from the parent who's supposed to emotionally attune and regulate the child? This creates a mess inside. The self-talk and the emotions that go along with it create crazy behavior patterns, and we find ourselves looking at our teenage children thinking, what the heck is going on? Or wondering, why are we always being accused of being emotionally distant by the people that we're trying to be in relationship with? Or becoming too needy, or becoming pathologically independent. We then find ourselves asking, when was it that I learned that I couldn't trust anyone? Or trust myself, for that matter? As my friend was telling me about this, I was able to give her a different perspective on how she might want to handle the next meltdown, because as you know, with small children in the home, the next meltdown is just around the corner. And sure enough, it was. So last night she told me that she was again in another situation came up, and Becky started to go into one of her meltdowns. But instead of breaking relationship and distancing herself from her little girl, she got down on her knees, put her arms out, and Becky ran into her arms for a cuddle. And almost as quickly as that temper tantrum started to erupt, it was completely resolved and the storm of inner chaos was stilled. Now I know some of you are going to want to believe that this is rewarding bad behavior in children, and I cannot emphasize how incorrect that is at this age. The best thing for our children is for us to maintain relationship in the midst of an emotional state so that we can teach them that uncomfortable or big emotions are not too scary and problematic for mom and dad. To be able to do this, though, we ourselves have to have a nervous system that is regulated, safe, calm, and unfortunately, I was a prime offender. And I'll give examples in the future of situations in which I allowed my children to trigger my own toxic shame. And so I was completely reactive to their behavior with equally bad behavior. We'll get to that in another video. But one of the most important things that we can do for our children is to heal from the wounds of shame and powerlessness that don't allow for us to stay in steady, consistent, predictable, safe, kind inner state as we interact with our kids. So I want to encourage you that the next time you're in a situation with one of your children, whether it be a small child or a young adult, where they are showing to you through their outward behavior that there is an inner storm, instead of creating distance and trying to rely on cognitive skills that in the moment they do not have access to, move toward them in a state of regulation and calmness so that the relationship and connection can be maintained and that attunement can be accomplished. Once you have attunement and regulation being restored, then you can come along later with the cognitive stuff that they're now in a state to be able to receive. Although we always have to honor their developmental stage, of course. I wish that I had known these things when I was raising my own children when they were little, because we tried every form of child training that we could think of, and none of it worked. And if it did look like it was working, it was mostly surface obedience that ends up not being maintainable later in life. That sort of surface obedience will erupt in ways that are not healthy. I started to make these adjustments when my boys were in high school, and I immediately saw improvements, not only in their behavior, but also in our relationship and in my ability to stay regulated, even though they were triggering all of my anger and anxiety stress mechanisms. Now, of course, I didn't get it perfect all the time, and I still don't. But I hope that you've received something from Becky's story. Even if you don't have children, you can look back on your own childhood and maybe start to figure out the root of the beliefs and behaviors that are keeping you from the abundant life of peace, joy, and love that we were meant to enjoy and display as image bearers of the Creator. So I hope you guys are doing well. Take care. Keep at it. Shalom.